Hey everyone, in this chapter, we're going to talk about chapters E6 and E7, going over the combat segment, basically. So in this video, I'm going to give you a detailed demonstration of a Union Yorktown 3 class heavy cruiser firing at a Volare V7D. You can refer to chapter E6 and E7 for a detailed step-by-step list of the actions that need to be taken. So without further ado, let's get into the video. Okay, so here's our game board. We have just completed our movement. The navigation segment is complete, and now we're in the combat segment. We've determined the firing sequence, and the Union heavy cruiser gets to fire first because it put 1 point of power to its tactical scan, whereas the Volare ship did not. So it gets to fire first, and its damage takes effect first. Next, what we're going to do is we're going to determine the range and the arc to the target. So I'm going to take my ruler, I'm going to put the 0 right here at the center point of my heavy cruiser, and I will put it on the center point of the Volare heavy cruiser or battle cruiser. And what I see here, it's hard to see on the screen, but it's a range of 4. So we're at like 4¼ inches away. And so anything from 4 inches to 4.999 inches is range 4. So it's a range 4 attack. And it's going to be hitting the Volare ship from its right front arc, or its starboard front arc. So it's basically hitting the left shield of the Volare ship. So I've determined all of that. And now I get to pick the weapons that I'm going to use. Okay, now that I've determined that it's a range of 4, I look at my ship form and determine which weapons I'm going to fire. So I'm going to fire my Mark V antimatter torpedoes and some phasers. So I get to fire, it's a range of 4, which means 2 red dice for each antimatter torpedo launcher I fire. So that's going to be a total of 4 red dice. Then with the LNC 500 phaser, I'm firing my forward and my starboard phaser. And as we see here at range 4, I get 4 green dice to choose from. So I grab those dice and I go ahead and roll them. And once I've decided which weapons I can fire, or I'm going to fire, I would erase the arming circles, the highlights of these arming circles right there, and these arming circles right here, and I would just go ahead and erase those. Okay, so now it's time to roll the dice. So I get 4 red dice to start with there. That's what I am going to be firing, is 4 red dice and 4 green dice. In this particular case, the Yorktown has 3 targeting points, and the Volare ship has 3 jamming points. So basically the targeting and the jamming cancel each other out. So it's basically straight range as measured by the ruler. Then I basically just roll the dice. So here we go. Okay. And I put these together here. And what I got is 3 S's and a blank for the torpedoes. And for the green dice, I got a heavy hit, a medium hit, a light hit, and a blank as well. Now, if you look at the chart for the Yorktown 3 heavy cruiser, those range brackets that were used are also green in color, which means I can make a reroll as the heavy cruiser player. So I'm going to take the 2 dice that missed, and I'm going to choose to reroll those. I don't want to risk any of my other dice. I like those where they are. So I reroll these, and I get a light hit from one of the green dice and a medium hit from one of the red dice. So I just did essentially an extra 5 points of damage. So now what we do is we total up the damage and apply it to the Volare ship. So looking at the weapons chart for the Yorktown heavy cruiser,
a special hit. Those are the S's here. Those are essentially just heavy hits. So, and a heavy hit is worth 4 points of damage initially plus a leak damage. So with the leaks, a good technique we usually use is for every heavy hit or for every leak, we just draw some cards, some damage cards that will be revealed later. So there's 3 cards for each of the special hits. And then we get to the green dice here, and we have a heavy hit right here. So that's going to be another leak. So there's going to be a total of 4 leak damage. So that goes through the shields no matter what. So that's the minimum there. Now let's total up the damage. So for each of the heavy hits, which are the S's and the H, that's 4 points of damage. So that's 16. Each of the medium hits do 3 points of damage. So that's another 6 points of damage. And then each light hit does 2 points of damage. So that's another 4 points. So between the mediums and the lights, we have 10 points of damage. And between the 4 heavy hits, which are 4 each, is 16. So 16 plus 10, 26 points of damage applied to the Volare cruiser. And so then we would simply get out the Volare cruiser's ship form here. We would simply mark off 16 points. We would mark off all of its shields, which in this case, this ship has 14 points of shields. And so 14 minus 26 is 12. So that's basically as difficult as the math gets. So we apply 14 points of damage to the shield. That's all 14 points right there. And then we would apply 16 points of damage to the Volare ship for internal damage.
Okay, so let's apply the damage to the Volare cruiser. So to recap, it suffered 26 points of damage plus 4 leaks, and that was all enough to penetrate the shields anyways. So it's a total of 30 points of damage minus the 14 points of shield boxes that it had. So it's going to be a total of 16 points of internal damage to the ship. So I've selected a variety of cards just to demonstrate some of the different types of hits and explain those a little bit. And we'll go into a little more detail on those with specifics on damage cards. But here's how relatively quick and simple it is. So first card I draw, and you can follow along with your own damage cards if you like, is the shuttle or any hangar bay. So I would come over here to the shuttle, and I would mark that off right there as damaged. Next, auxiliary reactor. So I go over here, and it's a reactor. So that's also... So this is the auxiliary reactor right here, and it takes 1 point of damage there. Now notice the ship hasn't lost any power yet because you have to do 2 points of damage to the auxiliary reactor to knock it down from 9 points of power total down to 8. Next is the FTL drive. So that is right down here. Mark off 1 box off the FTL drive. Next is an any hit. So that means I get to choose. So I'm going to choose a quarters hit. Next is a sensor power loss. So what that does actually is I would erase the power to this box of sensors, and my ship would only then have 4 sensor points. And so at this moment, I would have to remove 2 sensor points from my stat card and reduce either my targeting or my jamming. Since I would be planning to fire next, I'd probably reduce my jamming since I've already been hit at this point. So, but that's how that works. The next hit would be a no effect, so we ignore it, nothing happens. Next hit is a structure damage. So I'd come over here and mark the first undamaged structure box there. Next is sublight drive. Now that's different from the sublight reactor up here. This would be the sublight drive. And so I would start at the 6 and mark that off as damaged. Next is the sublight reactor, so I would come up here and mark that off right there. Next is an any weapon, so I would get to choose the weapon. So I'm going to damage a port weapon right here. So I would erase the arm boxes there and mark the black boxes damaged. Next is a shield power loss. So I would take 3 shield boxes, eliminate 3 blue shield boxes from any one shield. So I'm going to reduce my aft shields a little bit. Oh, and I almost forgot here. We took damage on the starboard shield, and all those shield boxes are marked as damaged. Okay, next is a major fire. So in this case, I would make a damage control roll to see if I'm able to put out the fire. So in this case, the ship has a damage control rating of 3, so I would roll 3 dice. And if at least one of them is an S, and in this case there wasn't, or I did roll an S, and so that means the major fire doesn't cause any damage because I rolled an S, I made a successful damage control roll, and stopped the fire. If I had been unsuccessful in that die roll, then I would have drawn an extra 3 damage cards and applied those to the ship. So what tends to happen is, as a ship takes damage, down here these numbers on the structure track are its damage control rating. As it's taken quite a bit of once it takes several structure points, it gets fewer damage control dice, and so the fires are more likely to have an impact. So it's kind of a situation where things go from bad to worse. Next, I take a quarters hit. So I apply that right there. Then I take a left main reactor, a heavy weapon hit, and so a heavy weapon hit is any weapon that uses red dice. So that would be my antimatter torpedoes. So I would be damaging one of my antimatter torpedoes. So that means if I were to go to attack and use these, I would lose 1 of my dice. So instead of rolling 2 red dice, I would roll 1 red dice. But I would still have to completely depower the weapon to fire it. Next is a transporter hit. So I'd mark that right there. A shield generator hit. So shield generators are bad because I've marked off that shield generator. And so in effect, when I go to repair my shields, instead of repairing 3 shield boxes, I would now only repair 2. And the same thing applies to shield reinforcement. If I had reinforced a particular shield, then that reinforcement will now only stop 2 points of damage instead of 3. So you could, in effect, mark off these green boxes right here just to remind you that you can't use them later on. Next is a right main reactor. Then a sciences, and a facing weapon. So now I have to choose a weapon that faces the Union heavy cruiser, and it won't be able to fire at that Union heavy cruiser because the Union heavy cruiser fired first. So that marks that off there, and I essentially have to erase the the power box, the power circles there for that weapon. So that's it. Now, let's just hypothetically say all the quarter boxes had been damaged, and then we drew an additional quarters damage card. Okay, so they'd already previously been damaged, and then on this 4th hit, we pull another quarters card. So in that case, since you don't have quarters anymore, the next thing you would do, if you didn't have any of a particular system, you'd go to the alternate hit just below, and you would apply damage to that alternate hit. And in this case, it's an any main reactor, so then I could come over here and mark off one of my main reactors. Now, hypothetically, if you don't have the first damage hit, and you don't have the alternate hit, you don't have any undamaged boxes of the first hit or the alternate hit, then that damage point would go here to your structure. And so what tends to happen is once your systems have all taken a lot of damage and you don't have the primary hit, you don't have the alternate hit, that's when you start taking the majority of your structure hits. And obviously once all the structure boxes are gone, the ship is destroyed. And there are optional explosion rules to allow for the ship to explode if you choose to use those rules. Otherwise, once you hit all the boxes, the ship is basically dead in space. Okay, that's it for the damage application. Okay, so in this video, I walked you through all the basics of making and resolving an attack against an enemy ship. The rules do lay everything out step by step detail of what to do and how to do it, but in most cases, it's just a very quick, simple process, just like you saw. Okay, so one of the first steps you do before anybody does any shooting is you figure out who's going to get to fire first. And that's basically as simple as on your stat card. As a matter of fact, we have one right here. So on your stat card, down here at the bottom is the tactical scan. The ship with the highest tactical scan gets to fire first, and their damage is going to take effect first. If two ships or more ships have the same tactical scan number, then their fire simultaneous, and then they've got to secretly pre-plot their fire and then reveal it all at the same time. You get your ruler, you measure the range. The range is going to tell you whether it's a green, black, or a red range bracket. And then based on the specific range bracket that you're using, you'll have dice. There'll be little diamonds underneath those numbers there, and they'll tell you which colored dice to use to make your attack. So once you've measured the range, you will also know the firing arc that you can fire from, which determines which weapons you can choose, and you'll see which arc on the enemy ship and which shield is being hit. Then you grab your dice and you roll them, and that will tell you how much damage you did. You just add it up: light, medium, heavy, or special hits, 2, 3, or 4, plus 1 leak. Of course, leak damage always makes it through the shields or the armor, no matter what. If the shield is penetrated, then those leak hits get added to the total. And if the shield doesn't get penetrated, you at least do that damage to the ship, to the target ship. Based on the color of the range bracket that was used, if it was a green range bracket, the attacker can choose one or more of the dice and re-roll it. For instance, if you got a miss out of your in your attack, a blank result, you could choose to take that one die and re-roll it. You can re-roll any or all of the dice, but whatever you do, whichever dice you re-roll, the new result is what stands. You only get one re-roll on those. So green arcs, the attacker can choose which dice to re-roll to try to improve the damage. If it's a black firing arc, then whatever was rolled, it just stands and there are no re-rolls. Then if it happens to be a long range red bracket shot, then the defender, the target ship, can choose which dice to re-roll. In which case, the defender is trying to reduce the damage by re-rolling and maybe getting some misses or some die roll results that do some less damage. Again, they can choose one or more of the dice, and whatever the new result is, that's what stands. So in both cases, both players have some decisions to make on which dice they want to re-roll. So we used these colored range brackets when we were designing the game to eliminate die roll modifiers. So you don't have to look at a chart or come up with look up a whole bunch of different die roll modifiers and then add those up and adjust the die roll. In this case, you just grab a die and you re-roll it as necessary. So finally, once you've done the die roll, you add up the damage, and if it exceeds the shield and the armor, then the shields are penetrated, or the armor is penetrated, and the remaining damage is applied to the ship. You draw, for every point of damage, you draw one card. And then the card has two possible damage results on the card. You start at the top damage result. If the target ship, does not have any more functional boxes of that particular type of system, you move to the alternate hit at the bottom of the card. And if all the alternate hit systems are also damaged, then you cause structure damage. And then the goal eventually is to damage all the structure on the enemy ship, and then that ship is out of the game. So stay tuned for more videos. Eventually, I'd like to do tactics videos and give you some detailed hints and tips on how to play well. Let me know in the comments if this was helpful, and if you have any other questions or things you'd like me to cover or topics you'd like me to cover, and I will add those into upcoming videos. Additionally, My goal with a lot of this is to try to just build up the Starship Combat gaming community. Again, I've loved all those games since I was a kid, from the old FASA game to the Amarillo Design Bureau games to many of the others that are out there, and some that are still out there being played today. So maybe we can even get some interviews going with other game designers or other players or perhaps event organizers, and we can work on building this community together. So stay tuned for more. Look forward to seeing you, and good hunting. Okay, that does it for this video. Don't forget to like, subscribe, share, and check out our other videos.